Well, hello, hello. Welcome to the Fine Print. It's just me again today. Vagabondia has a family thing, so we're gonna get started and talk about some things. Oh, sorry about my dogs. Somebody is probably walking their dog, and therefore, you know how dogs are. They must say hello. So, a whole lot has happened. You might be wondering why I'm not addressing Iran today, and there's a couple of reasons why. First, everybody's talking about it, and honestly, foreign policy and those sorts of things really aren't my strong suit. I know a lot about, no, let me rephrase. I know a little about a lot of things, and it is sometimes, like that, it's just one of those things that I know a little bit about, enough to probably more than the average bear, but I'm not 100% solid on that. So, but we are going to talk a little bit about it and share some, I guess, funny, not in haha funny, but funny as in, like, dear God, this is the timeline that we're living in. So, but before we get started, I wanted to first talk about Project 2025. And I hadn't looked at the tracker. If you are interested in looking at what I'm looking at, this is in my link tree, which is in the description. And I have no idea who put this together, but I've definitely vetted it, and all of their, I guess, ratings that they give to what tasks that Project 2025 sought to complete is all backed by links and references, both to the actual document and then to why they say it was completed. I also was disheartened looking at this today. They have a countdown till the end of the term, and that's a lot of days. So, but anyway, and what is really awesome about this tool is that it is, you can look at it as a whole or filter specific agencies or filter by subject. If, like, for example, you only care about educational things, or not necessarily only care about, but want to look at just education elements to it, you can, filter by subjects. So it's really helpful in that respect. And it kind of will put you in a bad mood, because, or like, it's easy to get disheartened looking at some of the progress of their things. But so this I filtered based on a few different agencies. I did ones mostly related to immigration / military / State Department. The State Department deals with a lot of different things, but what I was really curious to look at was more along the lines of how it is working with visas and passports and that sort of thing. So you can also filter the detailed objectives that it comes out with by agency status, date completed. I did status. So it's really kind of alarming when you see it checked off like a checklist, and you kind of see the pattern of, or maybe pattern isn't the right word, their objective, their bigger picture objective, I guess you could say, particularly when it comes to immigration and the horrors that they are doing, kidnapping and deporting people to gulags and concentration camps, because that's what they are. They're not jails or prison. They're detention centers. No, they're concentration camps. So you can also see a pattern in their progression of attacking specific institutions. There is a bright side I'll get to in just a second, but it's pretty stark. Eliminate the Office of Citizenship and Immigration Services. Eliminate Office of Immigration Detention. eliminate Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. Like, wow. And, I've read the entire document once, and it's like once all the way through, and then through doing, research or talking about it or bringing it to people's attention. I probably read it a second time, in small chunks. And you can see the plan. Like, I mean, it's just, you could say, Allison, yeah, duh, I could have saw this. It's more than that. Like, yeah, we all saw it, all who are maybe listening or who are like-minded like us, who are, who stay current with current events. But it's just really stark that they literally have a checklist. I'm looking for one in particular, particularly how it relates to elections, but I really recommend you look at this list, and, pick, if you want to see what I'm looking at, I don't want to take a whole session looking at it, but prioritize security clearance reform by streamlining the clearance process. Why? Like, what, these things don't make sense. Direct military to assist in building border wall. I should be required to take custody of all aliens for records for felonies, DUIs, and any other crime that is considered a national security or public safety threat. Okay. Well, I wasn't aware a DUI is a national security threat. Now, yeah, you could argue it's a public safety threat, but I'm pretty sure local law enforcement are handling it just fine. We don't need the Department of Homeland Security to, and it says aliens. Now, I'm not sure what the correct lingo is, and by correct, I'm not talking about like being politically correct. I'm talking about what the government uses to describe somebody who isn't a citizen, but isn't here illegally, here on a visa of any kind. And I think when they're saying aliens, they want to imply anybody who's a foreigner. So that, like, it's just gross, like, overstepping of, like, if there wasn't more intent, local law enforcement can, can take care of these small infractions. I mean, could you imagine 2 years ago trying to call Department of Homeland Security over a DUI or, something to that effect? Like, okay, so dismiss the entirety of the CISA, which is Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. Why? Ensure appropriate steps are taken to obtain cooperation with sanctuary cities and states. Prohibit the U.S. government from combating the spread of misinformation and disinformation. Department of Justice. First of all, forget how my personal opinions aside as a librarian. If you're going to allow freedom of speech to be unfiltered, unchecked, where we can say horrible things and not face governmental consequences for it, like, lies are lies. So that's, that's just, it's pretty stark. Indefinitely curtail refugee admissions, suspend visas to people from countries that do not accept the return of immigrants ordered to be deported. And it's like, a lot of these haven't been started. Some are still in progress. But the Department of Homeland Security ones are the most alarming that are on the list, that I'm reminded that are on the list. And, I was trying to find, they have elections where they want to get rid of all election cybersecurity command that, prevents elections from being tampered with from outside the US through digital means. And it's like, why would you do that? And it's really so stark. So I just kind of wanted to bring this back into the fold, to remember that these things are still happening. we kind of forgot about. Hi, Amethyst. They're still happening, and they are still it's still happening. It's kind of wild. Let me get that out of the way. So what I wanted to start talking about in particular too was related to Project 2025 and cybersecurity, which is, let me get this up here. And I don't know why this isn't a bigger story, like at all. Okay, sorry guys. My internet's really unstable. So this guy, Shyam Sankar, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and I apologize if I'm incorrectly saying it, pronouncing his name. He is the Chief Technological Officer of Palantir, and he has just enlisted in the U.S. Army as a lieutenant frickin' colonel. So one thing I do know, not expertly, but one thing I do know a little bit about from my stint as an Army wife, and knowing, being married to somebody who was loved to talk about, like, even I find, I love useless information, and I was just like, oh my God. But he loved to talk about Army stuff, like regulations. Like, he just had this uncanny ability to remember Army regulations and criteria and all that kind of stuff. In fact, his unit once gave him the nickname Mr. Regulation, because he just was a fountain of useless Army regulation stuff. So to get to Lieutenant Colonel, let me get back. It's not easy. And it's like you become Lieutenant Colonel at the end of your career, and then you retire usually. It takes 20 years. And usually you have to go to, especially if you go directly from, let's say, college to being a commissioned officer, it can take you a long time before you're hitting Lieutenant Colonel. Some people can do it in 12 to 15 years. Most, it's their last stop before they retire. And they worked really hard. They politicked for it. And this guy gets in easy peasy. And let me see if I can find this one. I found this out because oh, don't do this to me. I had her video on Substack. There is a bear with me, guys. There is a woman who writes about her military experience and that sort of thing. And it's starting to really gain traction on Twitter. So that is good. I'm looking through my Substacks because it's a really important video to see. But and when you try to rush something, you can't. It's even harder for you to find it. Here we go. I'm going to pause it.
From Palantir, Meta, we are in deep shit. When I say that we are in deep shit, we are in deep shit. You see these four These are CEOs, COOs from Palantir, Meta, and OpenAI, multi-billionaires who are being sworn into our U.S. Army reserves as lieutenant colonels. So Commander Bonespur and Pete Kegsbreath came up with a new detachment called Detachment 201, the Army's Executive Innovation Corps, or EIC. Last I checked, when anyone wants to join the military, they have to go through basic training, they have to go through MOS training, they also have to go through a background check to be able to obtain a security clearance, whether it's secret or top secret. But yet, we're giving these 4 billionaires who are in charge of monitoring our information, our data, through Meta, through Palantir, and OpenAI, we're giving them the key to our defense. They are being sworn in as lieutenant motherfucking colonels, lieutenant colonels. Whereas for some of us who actually served, it takes us years and years and years, up to maybe 25 years just to get that rank, just to be able to obtain that rank. So on June 13th, the Army announced the creation of Detachment 201, otherwise known as the Executive Innovation Corps, which it describes as a new initiative designed to fuse cutting-edge tech expertise with military innovation. 4 ultra-wealthy executives from top tech companies were sworn into the unit ahead of President Trump's heavily promoted military parade, which was itself sponsored by Palantir. The Army's top spokesman declared that the Detachment 201 was being created to bring in tech innovation executive leaders to help the Army with the recruitment and the subsequent training of tech-focused people. So if it's not bad enough that we've got these 4 CEOs here that are in charge of meddling and having access to our private information, now they're going into the military, and now they're going to use AI technology. This is a direct control of military innovation. This would include AI surveillance, cyber weapons, and autonomous drones. So now Trump and Pete Kegsbreath are trying to weaponize our military by the use of these super wealthy CEOs from OpenAI, Meta, and Palantir. And with the rank that they are obtaining, they have control over their subordinates, sergeants, sergeants first class, first sergeants, and command sergeant majors. They have more rank than those that have already served. And these motherfuckers didn't even go through training. This is what happens when you elect a motherfucking clown and you get a circus in return.
Okay, so Amethyst, I see what you're saying. I'll post this up there. It is common for tech guys. I've always heard them get surpass lieutenant and go into captain or major. Getting a security clearance, like my ex-husband was a staff sergeant and had a top secret security clearance, so he could do some tech type command center job when he was deployed. So maybe it's common now. Everybody I've spoken to or said that lieutenant colonel was a bit excessive. But I've always heard the tech guy dudes who embed in the Army, they often give them captain or major. But even then, they're at least going through, like, this is like, they're given a pretty big exception, like skipping literally everything, and then having the audacity to post on Twitter that they are enlisting. First of all, you're not enlisting; you're a commissioned officer. Let's not pretend that, like, you're the man of the people here. So, and I guess maybe I could be a vocabulary snob on that, but the post that dude was making, he was basically saying, I can't wait to serve my country. My dude. I don't know. It's a lot. But who knows? Maybe now, I guess, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe and it's a new squadron that they're forming too for these people. I'm not going to show you them, but on their when I was researching this story, because I was really disturbed by that. They also have, which might be actually good for the military in a lot of respects, because it's not just Palantir. There's several companies that are enlisted. There, you know what? Fair enough. I almost said enlisted. They're signing up to embed themselves in the military, and I don't know what exactly they're like, what they're going to be doing. But anyway, so Meta's there, ChatGPT. I think their company is OpenAI. So those guys, in this article, they showed how AR and VR can be used for soldier training, which might be helpful to prepare soldiers mentally. Now, I bought my daughter an Oculus, and this is like the second gen. So this is a while ago. And I know VR and AR has significantly improved since then, but bear with me. So, my daughter was, like playing with it for hours, which I just don't know. Not all the time now, but I'm not that parent who's like, I mean, nitpicking, the kid, like when a kid gets a VR headset, like for Christmas, I'm not gonna, nitpick her the first, few days while she's on break. But anyway, so I was like, look, can I try it? So I played this game thing that was like a spacewalk. And dear God, like my feet were planted. I was sitting in a chair. My feet were on the floor. I could hear the heater going. I could smell my house. But man, was it, wow, it was realistic. It was so realistic that even sitting in a chair, feet on the floor, I got motion sick. And like, that's how it like plays with your head. So that actually might be a good thing to prepare soldiers for the environments they might be living in. If they have to go in a ground invasion or a particular area, or I know Delta Force will often, before they go in, they'll construct a lifelike model of the building they're entering in so they can have precision, accuracy. They know exactly where things are. So that might be helpful, so that you don't actually have to build a physical building. You can, just create it digitally. So I could see some benefits for the military, but we all know that there's, and I hate it's like when I say this out loud, it's really kind of wild on how I hear myself and I sound crazy, but this is our reality. And I don't like, talking about things and sounding crazy, but it's, I know a lot of you who are in the chat now watching, I'm not crazy because you're reading the same stuff that I am. So, this is a challenge. And, I don't really even know. It's kind of wild. It's really kind of wild. So anyway, so that's, and I don't know who would do this. If we had a president that operated in good faith, and there'll be some like people who will say, well, now president ever acts in, no, presidents, I genuinely believe that most presidents have acted in good faith. Now, why that can mean different things. I don't think they necessarily made decisions saying, how can I fuck the American people up today? I don't think almost all of them, I don't think had that, nor do I think that they were particularly sympathetic to the American people. If you go from, Washington to, 47, I don't think that all of them operated with like the best of intentions. But I do believe, no, that's not even the right word. I don't believe that they were always out for the average American person's interest. That definitely not. But I do believe they operated in good faith in the respect that they weren't trying to fuck the country and destroy it. Like even Nixon, I don't think was operating. I didn't live during Nixon, but reading and researching him, I think he was a very selfish person who really wanted to get away with a lot of shit. But I don't think he woke up saying, how can I screw the average American over? But I don't think he actually cared, But so when I say most, presidents operate in good faith, I genuinely believe they do or tried to do the things that they were doing because they thought it was generally the right thing for the country itself, most of the time. If we had a president that operated in relatively good faith with the American people, I think they would get ahead of this story. This is where Biden kind of screwed up. Obviously, he really cared about the American people. I genuinely believe he cared a lot. But he wasn't very communicative about this. But if there was nothing but good intentions, that Palantir wasn't trying to surveil us, I would like to think you would address that and not just do things like this. It's hard for me to believe that this is not going to really backfire on us, us being the average American. Because the amount of data that they have between these companies, the amount of data and information they already have siphoned from the government on us, coupled with what they're able to siphon off of just Facebook alone. Think about how much data Facebook has on us. We've been using Facebook 20 years. Some of us, almost 20 years. And, how does this not end up surveilling? Even though that might not be the intent now, how does this not surveil us? And yeah, he's the first anti-American president. Nixon, he was a bad man. He did bad things. He probably did not really care about the average American as much as he should have. I wouldn't call him anti-American though. I wouldn't, because even he didn't go. He had the decency to resign. No, Cynthia, you're absolutely right. I don't believe that they were vetted at all. Security clearances. My ex-husband was getting his top secret security clearance when we were engaged. And when you're getting a top secret security clearance, they go through your background with a fine-tooth comb. It is unreal. And when you list references for people, you can't use the same reference twice. So he had to put his elementary school, middle school, high school, and he had to put a reference from each one. So you're how do you put who still talks to anybody in elementary school? Well, you can put your mom down that says, yeah, he went to that elementary school, but you can't use your mom as a personal reference or for middle school and high school. So it's that kind of thing. You need character references, but that character reference can't be a job reference. So it is wild. So I couldn't be anything but because I wasn't his wife, that wasn't relevant. I could be a character reference, if that makes sense. So, and they ask you all sorts of intrusive questions. So it may not be as awkward when the reference is, a fiance, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, but it was pretty invasive. And so I don't know, but how do you get to be the, in fairness, how do you get to be the CTO of Palantir without being vetted somewhat? So, it's just it's a scary time to live in. And when I looked up this stuff on Palantir, and then I read the Project 2025 stuff, and now it all makes sense. Like, I mean, I'm a librarian, so I really like to offer credibility that I found information somewhere from an authoritative source. And one thing I'm struggling with as a librarian when I talk about these issues is that it's hard to, I want to say things, but I'm really reading between the lines versus, which could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to find this information. And it's stuff that people need to think about. Why would you get rid of, like, TSA? That's a Homeland Security initiative. Privatizing TSA. Why in the actual fuck would you do that? Like, TSA is not supposed to be profitable. So why would any company, where is a company going to profit off of it? It doesn't make it. And why would you want to leave our nation's airports, our nation's freaking airports, up to a private company? Like, that makes literally no sense unless it's to gather more data. That's one thing I can think of, but it's not security or safety. It's got to be because of data and, surveillance, yeah, that's a good point, Amethyst. A lot of, to get into just basic law enforcement, you have to get vetted. And I know some agencies don't do anything because how many times have we heard of that police officer, abusing his power, and he had done it in many other cities, states, whatever. So it's really alarming. And, why would you want to get rid of cyber commands unless you wanted, like, it not, because when something's publicly funded, it has to, like, there needs to be some level of transparency. And you can't just deem a whole agency as national security and classify I'm sure it happens that we don't know about, but, like, so the only thing that makes sense is they don't want public accountability, because private industry, even when it's publicly traded, there's a limit to the accountability that they have to give us. So, getting rid of TSA, getting rid of Cyber Command, why? Why should that be in private industry? Why should our nation? It's like almost like they're, the conspiracy theory, I guess, stories, claims about, it's almost like you're trying to take the conceptualized deep state and making it public. Do I think there's a deep state? Not quite. I definitely believe there's a whole thing of government that the public either doesn't know about or isn't allowed to know about, hidden behind classification and compartmentalization. I don't think that and I could be wrong, but the conspiracy theory guys, they could be wrong too. So, it really makes you wonder if there is that military industrial complex, which I do believe there's a military industrial complex. Even Eisenhower warned us against it. Is this just trying to make the military industrial complex, like, that's going to be surveilling us, an open secret? It really makes you question a whole lot of stuff. And it scares me, and I think we should be scared. I don't think we should be frozen with that fear, but there's a lot of big forces working against the American people. And that is going to bring us to our next segment of, I don't know if you can hear it in the background. There was a good rumble of thunder. I love thunderstorms. But the Democratic Party, you know, I'm writing an article for my other Substack called The Reference Point, which focuses on library issues, which actually is more popular than the Library of Democracy, which I created too, because I didn't think people wanted to read really about like library stuff. And also I walk a fine line with my job too. So I can be supported with Library of Democracy, but if it's related to my job, I can't really charge for that. And that's like ethics laws and working for a state, which is wild to me, which is freaking wild. I can't charge somebody $5 to read my stupid library newsletter, but Donald Trump can accept a $400 million airplane. Isn't that wild? Isn't that freaking wild? Sorry to digress, but because I work for the state, so, and I'm sure this is true in most states, like you can't accept a gift. I can, if ALA, the American Library Association, said, hey, Allison, we'd like you to come give the keynote at our annual conference. We'll pay for you. And I don't know if they actually do this, by the way. I've never been asked. Nobody has actually cared what I think enough to ask me to be their keynote speaker. But, you know, there's like, hey, Allison, we want you to be our keynote speaker and we'll pay for your airfare and free conference. And, you know, we'll give you an honorarium of $100. I have to walk a fine line and contact our legal office to make sure what I can and cannot accept, how I can accept it. And, you know, like it's wild. It is wild. Like the level I have to go to, I am told to go to, because then I can be fired. But the president of the freaking United States can accept blatant bribes, which is in the Constitution. You know, it is just the unfairness of it. And I don't want to sound like it's not fair, you know, but it kind of like how can they expect us, the audacity to ask the average American who struggles daily with something, to not accept $100 honorarium to speak at a professional conference, but the president of the United States can accept a $400 million plane from a foreign government. Like, does anybody really, like, does that bother anybody else? Because it really bothers me a lot, that we're held to this standard of law sometimes. But the president can just do whatever the fuck he wants. So can a whole lot of other people with enough money. And it's just so, oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. You see, it's the Congress letting him be. And, you know, we got to take names and remember, because I fully believe this will be over eventually. This will be over. MAGA will never go away completely. But we need to, when those schemy, swarmy, greasy politicians try to rewrite their involvement, like there must be accountability for this. There has to be. There has to be accountability. And I think we're going to have it on an international stage based on yesterday's events. I don't have any sympathy for Iran. Okay, I'm well aware of the atrocities it has committed, both when the Ayatollah took control, and the monarchists are acting like, you know, oh, if we install the Shah's son, I forgot his name already, but you know, it'll be a monarchy is not a democracy. I mean, I suppose it can be share power, kind of, but not really. I heard the Shah wasn't, all that great himself. He was a pretty awful person too. So I have terrible sympathy for the people of Iran. But so let me preface what the next thing I'm going to say is I have no sympathy for the government of Iran at all. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we get to, what's that quote? And I'm not sure who said it, but let's make sure that we don't become monsters when we set out to kill the monster. And I mean, we elected a monster, a crazy monster. The library. I like that, Kim. The rich get richer and the librarians catalog it. Absolutely. No, it's wild. So anyway, I started talking about the Democrats. So I started writing an article for my other Substack before I went off on that tangent about the American Library Association. Their annual conference is coming up next week. I'm not a member of ALA. It's not like the American Medical Association. It's not that, but it is kind of that. It's like this awkward fitting professional organization where you don't have to be a member of it to be like an accredited librarian, but where you go to library school has to be ALA accredited, or you'll never get a job anywhere in the world, nevertheless the United States. Like when other programs and universities are going up for their accreditation, the library of the university has to be ALA accredited too. So like they're not really a governing body, they're not a certifying body, but in a sense they kind of play a small role in that, if that makes sense. So they have been pissing me off. They have been pissing me off since 2017 when Trump said that's fake news to Jim Acosta, because they've had no response. And the escalation of hostilities on libraries and librarians and teachers, I get it, teachers probably aren't their purview, but like they have done nothing except send us graphics that we can post on social media. I don't know any librarian that has a massive following. I'm sure they exist somewhere. Like most of us have a few hundred to a few thousand followers on any given platform. There's a few libraries that have pretty big followings. Like the New York Public Library obviously is going to have probably millions of people following it. But librarians itself, like that does nothing. Giving me a beautifully designed graphic that I can make myself in Canva does not help me. How do I combat book banning and people coming for librarians, trying to jail them? How do I and when I go to your website looking for help, you charge me $79 for a class or $89 for a textbook. The American Bar Association filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of all lawyers in the country. Now, the Bar Association is a little different, obviously, but not really. They have the same kind of governance over lawyers versus you don't have to necessarily be a member of the American Bar Association. You have to be a member of the state bar that you practice law in. But like the lawsuits filed on behalf of librarians or libraries were filed mostly by other organizations like Every Library. If you want to help libraries fight, book everylibrary.org. Wonderful group of people they have. I once I didn't know I was talking to their CEO. I guess founder and CEO of the organization. I didn't know I was going to end up talking to him, but I wanted for Constitution Day, I wanted to see if he would speak, because book banning was a thing. And I was really looking for anybody, but he said he was, he would come talk to us, talk about book banning and the Constitution related, and because every library was suing a few counties in Georgia for banning books. So that's where he came in. So, they just provided no help, no communications, no, like, okay, people are calling us pedophiles and groomers and nothing. And and now, like, you have this conference that costs a minimum of $300 to attend. And that's just a portion of it. If you want to go to other portions, that's more money. And then if it's in Philadelphia this year, I think it's in a different city most years. But it's commonly in Philadelphia. But so, then people have to fly to Philadelphia. So that's anywhere from like $2,000 to $1,000, depending on where you're flying from. And then hotel, which could be anywhere from $2,000 to $1,000. So if states are banning libraries from even affiliating with ALA, so that means that in Montana, if a librarian's library wants to send her to ALA, they cannot use state funds to send her. That's even if they have the funds to send her. So I'm just so angry. So I'm writing about this, and it might be a harsh critique. It might be too much. I got to get it off my chest. And I'm sure I'm not the only librarian who feels this. They remind me of the Democrats. It just really started hitting me. So where I'm going with this, I didn't mean to stumble upon this topic, and I don't think they have the stones to let me get this up on there. On Substack, I saw this and I was like, that's a brilliant idea. And I had forgotten, as much as I've studied and have been kind of obsessed with World War II history, one thing we're not comparing World War II is the respect of how Nazi-occupied governments reacted. So what do I mean by this? So France is occupied, most of the country is occupied by, the Nazis. The government that was in place at the time went into exile and worked as France's government too. A few countries did this. I think Denmark did this, or Denmark, the Netherlands. I might be confusing Denmark and the Netherlands, but the Danes definitely formed a shadow government that was working. And there's a really good movie. I got to find the name of that movie, but there's a really good movie about Denmark's shadow government and how it was still able to use bankers actually funded a lot of the the resistance legally with Denmark's own treasury. It's a wild movie. I got to find the name of the movie, but and so this, I don't really know who this. Oh, Dino Badai. Yes, I do know him. I guess he's considered, I wouldn't say he's far left or a leftist, but he's definitely a little bit left of liberal from what I gathered of him. I don't know if y'all follow him, but I don't think the Democrats have the balls to do this. And you know what? Maybe it's just not public, but I refuse to believe that Congress, if somebody like Mike Johnson found out that there was a shadow government working against, I highly doubt he would keep that to himself. Particularly if Trump found out there was one. But who knows? Maybe there is one. Maybe there is one. But we forget about the other parts of World War II and pre-World War II that we should reflect on, to use as an example on how to resist. Now, I don't know how you form a shadow government. I think that if you form a shadow government, like, that definitely implies a civil war. And I have no doubt that like, NATO would recognize our shadow government, probably. I don't know how that works with weapons. I don't know, like, I'm sure there's a lot that would have to get ironed out, but, like, my whole point is that I wish Democrats would grow a spine and do something bold. That's what ALA needs to do too. Bold frickin' actions. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure I can find. I'm sure I can find it pretty easily. I couldn't even if somebody mentioned it in the chat, I probably wouldn't be able to verify that was the movie I was thinking about. The guy who led the charge of using Denmark's own treasury legally, he eventually becomes Denmark's United Nations ambassador. That's how I'm gonna, like, Google search it. But it was really fast, and it was a story that you don't hear about because there was just so much. And I think that's probably true with any large, massive conflict that people resist about. I mean, think about our resistance. There are probably millions of us around the world trying to resist Trump in some way, shape, or form that nobody's ever going to remember my name except for a few people in my family, if I'm lucky. There are so many people who work, so it's possible. Like, the things that made the world successful in defeating Hitler, we're doing too. Like, just, it's different because it's 80 years later. And I think that gives me a lot of hope that, as bleak as things seem and as fucked as they are, I think, we'll eventually be okay. I really, eventually, I think we're in for a world of hurt. What's that, in Jurassic Park? I wish I had, like, a sound, like a producer who could hold on to your butts. Like, that's what I hear in my head every time I see a new headline is Samuel. Yeah, no, it's not Samuel L. Jackson. Danny Glover. In Jurassic Park, when they're restarting everything in the park after, to counter Nedry's, hacking that he did that basically shut the park down. And the reason why the dinosaurs are all running around. Yeah, corporate media. Yeah, I think, this is just one average American's opinion that, like another nameless face in the sea of Americans in the world in this moment that we're in. When we get through this, because we will get through this. When we get through this, we have to, like, there is no, like, we cannot go back to what was our normal. I don't know what that means or looks like, but we can't keep on the way we're going. Like, it's just not possible. And I mentioned maybe a couple of weeks ago, the economist that teaches at University of Massachusetts at Amherst, I forgot his name again, but he basically says you either have to break the system or you have to reform the system. sometimes it's better to reform, sometimes it's better to break and do something else. And he used the example of when you have to break the system because it can't be reformed was slavery and the Civil War. A lot of people wanted to reform the system. The southern states said, no, we want to keep slavery, and that system had to be broken. Reform after the Gilded Age, which I don't know why, the Gilded Age was only gilded for a few people, and then the most massive progressive reform came right after. So I don't know why Trump wants to go back to that period. But I digress. But, was after the Gilded Age and the Great Depression, they reformed the system. I don't think we can reform, because if we don't break it and do something new, and that doesn't necessarily mean we become communist or social or anything related like that. I think we can have a capitalist society, but it just it does not work when everything is profit motivated. It doesn't work. You can't argue that it works. You can't say we're the best in everything, because we're not. It's time we stop fooling ourselves that we are, and, taking students' visas and not allowing students to come study here. Well, you know what? They're going to study somewhere else. And then when they're done with their degrees and they, do all their sciencey innovation at another foreign university, you know what they're going to do? That technology becomes someone else's, not ours. And, I would love to ask somebody in the know, particularly Rick Wilson. If anybody knows Rick Wilson, I have some questions for him I am so curious about. I don't think he'll take my email, but just putting it out, Rick, I have so many questions for you. But one in particular is, do these assholes in government, are they obviously I know many of them are operating in bad faith. Many of them just want to get rich and siphon off the system. But there's a lot of them who are true believers in this. Do they realize what, are they able to make the connection that if you get rid of international students and not let them come here to study, that this breaks our science and innovation? Or do they just not care? Or are they just, all about the dear leader? I would love to know, because it seems so obvious to me, and I know it seems so obvious to a lot of you. But it doesn't make sense. No, do not obey in advance. Look at the American Bar Association as an example. And libraries obeyed in advance without realizing it. Well, that's a bit strong. No, I won't say they obeyed in advance. They tried to resist ineffectively. And, but at the same time, I'm not that smart. I'm smart. I know a lot of things. I'm perceptive, but I refuse to believe that things that I thought of, they didn't, because they're way smarter than me and they know way more people and they have way more resources. The Georgia Library Association, we hired a lobbyist and a PR person. And every time they've come at us since we hired one, we've pushed back the legislature, and they're going to come back at us again, and we'll push them back again. But if Georgia's, which is a teeny fraction of libraries across America, can do it, ALA surely could have. So thanks for listening to my little rant about library politics, even though it's not really politics. When the book ban movement really got underway after 2022, the midterm elections, I started creating a database, and I called it What the Fuck News, WTF News, so I could refer back to that period. And I'm referring back to that. It's far from a comprehensive database of content. It's news articles, social media posts, lawsuits, books that were banned, photos that I found online. Far from comprehensive. It's just me and a Airtable and a browser extension. I can't possibly save everything that I see, but just from what I saved from that period of time, and I still collect information. How did we not do something? I'm obsessed with history too, Super Saint. Because the way I don't see how people. Well, no, I do see how people when it comes to, and I realize we got to wrap it up. We're at the top of the hour, but history to me, I love stories, and history class for me was like soap operas that were true, and I'm just fascinated because I always want to know what happens. You can't just tell me a small part of what happened. I need to know what happens, and why somebody did that. But I realized that some teachers, particularly from my generation, older, teachers made history class really painful. I had some really good history teachers who, weren't bent on, they never required us to know exact dates. That's not what was important. They didn't care if I knew the exact date of the Civil War. What they cared about is I knew the time period, and more importantly, why was that important? Why should we be remembering the Civil War or different elements of the Civil War? Yeah. I didn't read his book, but I've watched a lot of his content on YouTube. Dr. Stephen Hassan, if you don't know who he is, he was a cult member of the Moonies from the 70s. And he was deprogrammed and eventually, became a psychologist and expert on cults. And, I really like his work, particularly because it's not only coming from his observation, but his participation. And it puts a lot of insight into why people are in MAGA now, or are so, identify so strongly to MAGA. I guess I should say. Just one more thing I wanted to go over, and then I'll let y'all go. Here we go. So I don't know if y'all felt all dirty and weird, but dear God, I have agreed at least once with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, and now Thomas Massie. And I don't like the feeling. And I get it. A broken clock is right twice a day. And a lot of these people are right for the wrong reason. But they're still, it's a spade is a spade. And I just thought this was kind of funny. Touche, Mr. Massey, touche. One other thing I wanted to point out because I firmly believe that we need to remember, and I know we're inundated and saturated in media, and it's a lot. But I am glad that I explored some areas that I don't normally, because I found this one clip of an interview with the mayor, primarily because it's a Democrat punching, the media, not literally, obviously. But it also was like, damn, I didn't know that about Chicago. Well done. Well done. So this is the mayor of Chicago, and he's being interviewed. Now he's responding harshly to a reporter's question. They don't include what that question was. I think they're asking about Trump, because I looked at other clips from the same, but let's play this.
Different direction. Y'all would be asking me all kind of questions.
Let's start this over again.
About what is it that I'm doing that's not working. We're doing the things that work. And I'm not saying that you can't ask about this. I know it's being debated. I'm just simply saying that, my goodness, you all, Chicago, we have suffered for decades in this city around violence. And now here it is, 2 years in my administration, every single major violent category in this city where violent crime is recorded, it's going down. Unprecedented numbers. Look, we're hopeful that we will continue to see this trend, but I get so sick and tired of the lazy form of governance that people don't seem to have any answers, do not want to roll up their sleeves to figure out how we can invest in the lives of Black and brown children, to make sure that Black and brown women and parents are supported. Most of this stuff we can transform overnight if we actually invested in families. The cumulative wealth of Black families in this city is $0 freaking dollars. You got Black people waking up every single day in this city with all the wealth and they're barely breaking even. And they're talking to me about a curfew. Unemployment that we're trying to address. Thousands of opportunities that we're trying to create, building more affordable homes and doing it under extreme circumstances with a federal government that is stomping on the Constitution. And Chicago was standing firm, still building homes, still creating jobs, still building our transportation system, still investing in our young people, still providing more mental and healthcare services. Those are the things that are working. We'll keep doing it. Thank you all.
Well said, Mr. Mayor. Well said. So that was refreshing to know that Chicago is doing a lot better. You know, I know it was going through some things. You know, with that many people, of course, it's going to go through things. I don't know why, you know, people get so shocked or, you know, I don't know how. New York City, I know, has 8.2 million people in it. In all 5 boroughs. And I just recently looked that up. That's how I know it offhand. So, and if that's the largest city in the country, so let's just say hypothetically it has 4 million people. That's a lot of people. So I like, you know, while there's a lot of stuff that's really awful, there's also, you got to take the victories when you can. Otherwise, we will burn ourselves at both ends till we're done. And hi, Michelle. So just a couple of things. Let me do the socials. All of our links are in the description, but a few things I wanted to point out since I updated our link tree. We have bookmarks. We have one with the First Amendment on it, and ISIS tear gas smells like fascism stickers, and we have bumper stickers too. So check out our new merch shop that Vagabondia and I created. Now it looks, you know, it's not a huge change in format, but I did put some new links in, particularly in fighting fascism. I found on Substack, I believe, this, you know, I don't know who as a person it is, but they have been doing the Lord's work, and they have created a website, and it's not a spreadsheet, it's a Google Doc of pretty much if a Republican or alt-right, right-wing, far-right public personality was arrested for some form of abuse, whether it's domestic violence, sexual abuse, abuse of children, rape, you know, anything related to that, they track it. Wild. Like, and why is that important? Well, because it is really alarming to see how many are there. You know, does this happen in the Democratic Party? I'm sure, but it certainly seems like the people of family values are way more egregious. So before you start, you know, trying to invade somebody's house, why don't you clean up your own first? And then the Project 2025 tracker that I was talking about earlier, that's linked there. Here is our Substack link. It's a great way to support us. Most things are free there. Marie Rivingtons is the editor of the Kaufman Chronicle and does a fabulous job of keeping Tony's Substack going, and with really great content, really awesome editorials. So the link is there to support him. There's our link to the channel and the podcast, and we're on Spotify, Apple. I finally figured out how to do that, and how you can support me and Vagabondia. You can become a paid Substack supporter, buy us a coffee. Check out our bookstore in bookshop.org. We get a small commission. If you buy something, it doesn't cost you anything. It's an affiliate link. And then some affiliate sponsor, let me try that again. Affiliate links for, if you are having a hard time with everything. I've tried this before. I thought it was great. So I put the affiliate link there, and Headspace is basically, if you've ever wanted to read a book but don't have the time to, Headspace summarizes really great literature, on a whole host of topics. It could be on neurodiversity. It could be on anxiety. It could be mindset. It could be, important classic literature that you should read. It summarizes it in both written and audio form, and gives you the key points so that you can, and helps you find the book if you want to read it in its entirety. If you want to read the book in its entirety, check out our bookstore, because we get affiliate credit for that as well. So I really like it. It's fairly inexpensive. I think I pay something like $6 a month. I subscribe to it though quarterly. But you get a free trial and use our link. That helps support us as well. And here you can support Tony Michaels. He helps us with our software. He lets us use his StreamYard account, and we thank him for it. That's really it for socials. Click on any of these to get to our social media. I haven't been that great on posting and whatnot. It's really just me and Vagabondia, and life gets busy sometimes. So, and of course, subscribe to, oh shoot, did I not this whole time? I thought I was sharing this. Oh, good God. This is why you need to help us grow, so we can hire people who aren't like morons like I am. But just a basic recap, if you're interested in fine print merch or ICE's tear gas smells like fascism, we have First Amendment bookmarks, so check out our store. I've already explained all of this, but here's the visual. So I feel like a moron. I'm sorry. That's life. So Tony Michaels is so important. His podcast is Monday through Friday. It's 12 p.m. to 2 Eastern, but he's changing it as of June 30th, it will start at 5 p.m. Number 24 on Netflix. Is that what it was? That would make sense. I saw it on Netflix because I'm a big, but Tony Michaels is a great community, particularly if you want to you need cathartic release and somebody who's not going to sugarcoat things. Obviously I don't think I sugarcoat things, but I'm not Tony. So my attitude, because I'm not Tony, my attitude's different because I'm a different person. But if you have that kind of raw rage, and I'm kind of making him sound scarier than he is, but it's just no bullshit. No sweet talking. Calling ICE detention facilities concentration camps, because that's what they are. They are kidnapping people off the street and deporting them to these concentration camps. And that's Tony. He's not going to sugarcoat it. You may not always agree with everything he says. I find that refreshing, because part of why we're here is ideological purity. I don't always agree with him. Marie Rivington shreds him sometimes on the Kaufman Chronicle, and that's his own. So he's that kind of guy. Tejas was. Oh, I get it. I said it out loud. I didn't understand what you were saying. Chicago population is 2.6 million. Well, that's still a lot of freaking people in a small area. Mobile, that one shot. Mobile has some serious. Alabama has poverty, like and it's not even the worst. But when I've gone, my husband's rehab facility is in the middle of nowhere, Alabama. So you drive through some really rural parts to get there. It's about 2.5 hour drive. And the poverty, these people are living in mobile homes that barely have windows. We're talking they got garbage bags as windows. So the reason why I say is poverty is a pure catalyst to crime. So, this is all shit we know too. We know education and poverty, or I should say lack of education and poverty, are the two factors that lead to high crime rates. So what might be helpful? Invest in education and give the people some relief. I mean, what some of these red states do to its citizens is just bonkers. I understand being a conservative. I get it. And we need conservatives. We need people to say, hey, slow your roll. Is this really the most effective way to help people? Or is that the best way we can spend money? I get that. And we need all sorts of people. We need the dreamers, the doers, and the practical people to really make a difference. Because you know what? I got big ideas, but I'm not always the most practical. I can think of shit that we could do all day long, but, so we all need all those types of voices to solve big problems. But these people, in these state governments, is unreal. And I understand nobody wants to pay taxes, but you know what else nobody wants? Poverty, crime, shitty roads. Some of the roads in Alabama are and these aren't back roads. They're not interstate, but they're considered state highways. I mean, when your people and your education system is so terrible that it can barely support itself. You can't be giving tax breaks to people that make, millions of dollars a year. And and I realize we're way over time, but I thought one of the best things Gavin Newsom did, and, I don't know, impact, I don't know if it was all that significant, but I was so happy to see it. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, God, she is such an awful human being. Her and her father are terrible, awful human beings. And she's trying to say, we got to make sure the country doesn't turn into California and its crime rate. And Gavin Newsom clapped back, was like, well, yours is double per capita than ours. And per capita is an important thing to, when people start to say, oh my God, crime rate, they have so much crime. Well, if you have 4, 5, 6 million people in a city, yeah, the actual numbers of crime is going to be much more, because you have quadruple, 10 times sometimes the amount of people than in smaller states. The big but is you got to look at the per capita, which adjusts the ratio of what is the equivalent of California's crime rate related to Arkansas. And Arkansas has way more crime It's just the numbers are much lower than California because there's fewer people. So they're feeling more crime in Arkansas probably because the ratio is bigger per person than in California. That makes sense. Yeah, the road, like, you know, like one thing I have to, and people in my town in Georgia, I belong to a Facebook group partially to see what they complain about because it is wild what they complain about. Like, you know, moving to this town 10 years ago, this town was awful, god awful. It was a sad city that had seen better days like 100 years ago. And man, has this city really transformed itself. And, you know, the roads are getting fixed. Like there's a lot of road construction that people are complaining about. I'm just like, the roads are getting fixed. Like there was a pothole around the corner. I don't know how it got there, but it was almost borderline a sinkhole. It was like your tire would get fucked up if you hit that, not seeing it. And it was filled within the month. Not only they put a big old weighted cone so nobody would like mess up their tire, but it was fixed within a month. Like, what do you want? You know, and looking at it as from an observer, I mean, I don't know, liberal. I mean, I wouldn't call our mayor liberal. I think he's listed as an independent. I could have sworn he was a Republican when he first was elected. I think he changed to be independent. But man, like the town looks prettier. The downtown area, oof. Talk about a transformation. Like talk about a beautiful transformation. Like, so I'm just saying, Texas, the measles state. This is what, like, this is fucking wild. This timeline is just bonkers. Because these politicians, I know they know the vaccine shit is bullshit. I know they know it. And it's just like, that's why we cannot forget when this is over, we cannot forget. And, you know, we have to make sure they are held to account for the rest of their lives. Because, you know, that's swarmy like Ted Cruz. He might lose re-election eventually, but he'll try again somewhere. And we have to make people remember what a swarmy little dick he was, you know. Because people are deliberately misinformed, and now the CDC is going to fail them, all because, you know, for what? I'd also like to ask Rick Wilson if Republicans know the gravity of what they're doing, and do they care? Are they worried? Or like, is this the whole plan? You know, or are they gonna just jump ship? You know, I you know, so like I said, if anyone knows Rick Wilson, I have some questions. He doesn't even need to come on the podcast, you know, although that would be cool. But I just, on my own curiosity, I'm dying to know. So with that, like, share this, comment, subscribe, let me know what you're thinking. And hopefully next week we have Vagabondia again to chat with us. And with that, I will see you next week. You know, hang in there. And we'll get through this eventually. But all right, stay sane, stay safe.